Hi teachers, this is Mike Padilla. I'm an author of the Pearson program, Interactive Science. It's our K-8 program. And I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the confusing terminology in science education these days. Process skills, inquiry, or practices? What is the difference between all of those terms and how do we make sense out of it? So let me start from the beginning. Process skills is an old term. We've had it around for a long, long time. Typically, we would talk about observing or inferring or some of the more complicated ones like experimenting. So for example, I have here a little branch that I pulled off of a tree in front of my office building. Some of the observations a student might make are the glossiness of the leaves or the size of the leaves, the idea that there are berries here. So those are observations. An inference might be that perhaps something has been eating this particular bush. As you can see right here, one of the leaves has a little bit of a nibble out of it. Typically, when we think of process skills, we think of individual small skills, things that aren't big and that kids can practice in a short amount of time. And typically today, when we talk about process skills, we're thinking about elementary school kids or middle school children who have not had a lot of experience doing inquiry. So that's the process skill angle. It's an old term, it's a little out of favor these days, but still has a lot of important pieces to it. So the second term is inquiry. What does inquiry mean? Inquiry has been popular for the last 20 or so years, maybe longer, and it focuses on something a little bit bigger than process skills, like asking and answering questions. How can I find out? It definitely has that question focus. There can be partial inquiries where we, for example, only work on data analysis or designing an experiment, or a full inquiry. An example, I just happen to have my trusty plant here, might be investigating plants. This is very common in both elementary, middle, and frankly secondary classrooms. How would we design an experiment or a full inquiry around this plant? Well, we might have multiple plants of the same kind, and we might try to have students investigate differences between plants grown in very bright light or very low light, or very humid conditions versus very dry conditions, or it might be one soil compared to another soil. So for example, I had a sixth grade classroom investigating the growth of plants, and they decided to put several plants in a closet for a week and several plants in the sunlight. And they measured the growth at the end of a week. And actually, they were quite surprised by what they found out. More of that in just a second. The third term that has become very popular in the last year with the drafts of the next generation standards coming out is this notion of practices. And so what's the difference? What's the emphasis in practices? The key thing when you're talking about a practice is that the emphasis is on explanation or on argument for your point of view based on data. There's a maintaining of the question focus for sure, but it's more of the intellectual parts of it. It isn't just doing an activity, designing an experiment, collecting data, and saying, well, it's obvious that the plant in the sunlight grew better. It's actually building multiple arguments to look at it from different points of view. So it's more reflective of the full scientific process. For example, back to our plant, what the sixth graders found out is that the plants in the closet grew more than the plants in the direct sunlight. So they were really at difficult ends to try to make sense out of this. And it's that sense making that's the real key to practices. And so they began investigating what happens to plants when they're in dark and how they grow out, and maybe they grow more, but it's an unhealthy type of growth. It's a floppy kind of growth. And from that, they began to build an explanation for what's going on. So in summary, there's a lot of change in science education. We've grown from process skills, which are individual small skills, to inquiry, where we're focused on questions and investigations, and now to practices where we're really trying to put our intellect to bear and bring it to bear in the investigations we do. So this is where science teaching is. It never stays the same. I hope you enjoyed this video, and keep inquiring or practicing or process skilling, whichever way you want to call it. Take care.